Hello, everybody. Welcome to Holy Foley. I'm Dr. Vanessa Theme Ament, and my guest today is composer and trumpet player and sound designer Daniel Nissenbaum. Daniel works in film and television as well as recording and live performance and is in the New York, New Jersey area. Welcome, Daniel, and I cannot tell you how thrilled I am to be talking with you today. This is really exciting. It's so good to see you.
Thanks, Vanessa. It's a huge privilege for me to be able to sit here and speak with somebody with your experience and talents and insights. So
Well,
thank you.
okay, I think we should just end right there. Anyway, I feel really excited to talk with you because you are one of the better thinkers that I have ever known in my entire life. And we've had wonderful conversations in the past. And I am so thrilled because a lot of people may know your music, but they don't know what a fantastic mind you have. So here we go. I want to start with hearing about some of the projects you've worked on recently. And I want to hit how you use music as sound effects because I know what a tremendously gifted musician you are and the various vast wealth of things you're able to do with your music. But I want to touch upon some of them today because I'm very excited to hear about what you're working on now and what you've been working on recently and how you're expanding your vast wealth of talents.
That sounds great. Thank you very much. So as of late, one of the more in-depth projects I've had was working for a podcasting company called Gen Z Media. And Gen Z Media is one of the most prolific family podcasting companies in America. So I've been helping them. I was hired as a lead composer for a new show that they're launching in June called Discovering Dad. And it's basically a cross
Oh, wait,
between,
I love it already.
yeah,
Discovering Dad. This
Discovering Dad.
is
Yeah.
fabulous because
Yeah.
you are a father of two alpha children.
Yes, I am the father of two kids. Sometimes it feels like the father of 10 kids, which I'm sure any parent, even with one kid, feels like that. Definitely, I guarantee it. So, yeah, so the podcast is, at least stylistically, it's kind of a cross between Mission Impossible and Indiana Jones. And the premise is that the dad is a father in his daily life, and then he's also solving all of these mysteries and committing to all of these wild, crazy, tangential adventures at the same time. And the music really tied into that. It was sort of a mix exactly of this sort of off-kilter spy thematic kind of music with the rolling adventure John Williams-esque sounds that we heard in well, pretty much every adventure movie since the 80s.
This is
So
fantastic.
mhm.
And where might somebody see this show?
So
Hear
you're
this podcast. Hear this
yeah,
podcast.
you're gonna the company has its own intrinsic app, and then it's also going to be available on all of the major podcasting streaming outlets.
That's wonderful.
Mhm.
And so, do you also get to use some sort of sound effecty sort of sounds, or is it straight music?
I do. I mean, for the most part, with this particular show, it's a lot more tonally based and compositionally oriented, like traditionally compositionally oriented. But I do get to punctuate the action at times with some found sounds and some textures that I use from sampling and then synthesizing the sampled elements.
And so, how much time do you usually have to work on one podcast?
Well, with something like this, because the show was in pre-production when I came on, I actually had a fair amount of time. We had a couple of months, which is rare when a show is already established, when it's already been launched, and committing to new episodes and seasons. Sometimes we can have less than a week to do a single episode. I've heard in some circumstances that people will do back-to-back episodes and do maybe 10 episodes in a week. It really depends on the company, and it depends on the budgeting, and it depends on the platform. So thankfully with this, I had more time, and I got to work directly with the main composer and the owner of the company. So I could get a lot of feedback from a musician's standpoint, and he's also a script writer. So he was wearing both hats as a composer and as a script writer. And because of that, he can speak in two languages at the same time, which is
Oh, that's great.
wonderful. And he's a great guy as well. So the rapport is easy, and it's it's so straightforward and freeing not to get locked into these psychologically complex situations when a person wants to articulate specifically what they want, but specifically not in the language that you're accustomed to, which is this is every composer and sound designer I know. We get into this.
Now, is everybody that you're working with over on the East Coast, or are they all over the country?
This podcasting company is based on the East Coast. I was doing a short film with a studio in London that has a peripheral studio in Mumbai, and then also had some additional characters that were acting in Los Angeles. So we reach a fairly large geographical area.
Now, I can't remember what software you use. Do you use Pro Tools or Logic, or what do you use?
I use both Pro Tools and Logic. This is purely my own opinion and from my own experience, but I feel like Pro Tools is more of an analog representation of what it would be like to be at a literal mixing desk. And Logic feels more like a piece of software or an app. And because of that, there's certain things that I feel from a workflow standpoint are easier for me to do with Logic, and then also easier to do with Pro Tools. I feel like working with raw audio is much easier in Pro Tools, and I feel like working with sample libraries and processing different sound effects and things like that and samples, to me it feels much easier in Logic.
At this point, I want our audience to know how I know you. We're both in the Society of Composers and Lyricists, and we were partnered together in a workshop situation to write what was supposed to be a kids show song. And we palled together over the High Holy Days
I
and came
remember,
up
yeah.
with an Animaniacs kind of tune. And it turned out to be, I started out with most of the music and lyric, and then you came up with an additional chorus, music and lyric, and then you orchestrated it. And I found our partnership to be, in my situation, I thought it was one of the more brilliant experiences I'd ever had collaborating with someone. And then we had a singer from New York Stage sing it. And I thought your orchestration was phenomenal. And it was an incredible experience. And I found you to be, and I'm telling everybody this now because I have been around for quite a while and I've worked with so many gifted people. I found it to be one of the more amazing experiences of my life working with somebody that I thought was just over the top genius. So I'm telling everybody that now, so that anybody listening would know that Daniel Nissenbaum is one of the more gifted people I have ever worked with. And I have worked with some of the more amazing people in both LA and New York, but especially Los Angeles, where we have a larger number of people. I mean, you just throw a rock and you hit 1,000 gifted people. And so whenever I hear you doing something, I know that it will be genius. And I'm always excited to know what you're doing because your imagination just floors me. So I'm always excited to hear what you're doing. And my experience with you was we both work very fast.
Yes.
And I was known as a Foley artist for working very fast, but I write songs very fast. I can imagine very quickly, and you do too. And it was a whirlwind of an amazing experience. So I'm imagining that you can come up with all of this sort of ideating, and then, but you don't just ideate. You don't just ideate. You can execute and refine fast. And I think that this is a really unusual gift in our field because my experience in my world is that people can they can ideate or they can orchestrate. They can come up with something and they might do one part of it quickly, but then there's usually an area where they're slower.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that I can only do minimal orchestrating. I mean, I understand a lot of the theory and harmonizing. I certainly do not lack my understanding of it, but I just do not
Of
have
course.
the imagination and the gift of it. Certainly, I understand singing and I understand melody and lyric writing really well. And
Mhm.
I moderately understand some arranging. My gift is always in the vocal aspects of it.
Mhm.
There, I feel extremely secure. Where I was always, I think, less gifted, let the world know, was two areas. I'm a minimal piano player, although there are people making gobs of money who play piano nowhere near as well as I do, and I would never play in public. So I don't really know how that happens. And I will not name names, but boy, I see a lot of them making a lot of money. And I say, I play piano better than that, and I can't believe they're playing in public. But then when it comes to arranging, that's just a whole different ballgame.
Mhm.
So now what I want to ask is, what is your philosophy when you approach having to put down what on the paper? And I'm just using that metaphorically because I know that you're going right into your instrumentation with through your keyboard or through your guitar or through your horns. How you are coming up with your arranging ideas. How does that come through your mind and philosophically? How do you approach it?
Well, the first thing for me is to understand the context, the global context of what I'm working in, the medium, the style of what that media might be. So if it is a short film, if it's a commercial, if it's a podcast, they all have different rules. There's different limitations that you're working with. One thing that I've always liked about working in advertising is, and again, I've had some experience in advertising, doing composition primarily. It's kind of like a short story or a prose poem. You have a very short amount of time to get the point off. And every note that you play and every sound that is incorporated, every texture that's incorporated into the arrangement has to serve the purpose of serving the narrative. Now, if you look at that in relation to a feature film, for example, you can expand the quantity of information and texture and the quantity of music. So, but it needs to maintain the same kind of intensity and the same kind of fullness throughout, regardless of if you're making a 15-second cut down, if it's a stinger, if it's something like they have like audio logos now, like the old Intel, like the Pentium sound. It's just a couple of notes, and that's enough. Or maybe it's going to be 90 minutes of orchestral, wall to wall orchestral music. I think from that standpoint, the initial approach needs to be the same in that you have to understand the context you're working in, the medium. Then, once I have a good understanding of that, I really want to know what the story is. I feel like the story is king, no matter what you're doing. What is trying to be conveyed? Primarily, it's coming from the director, it's coming from the script writer. If you don't understand what their vision is, it doesn't matter how amazing the music is, it doesn't matter how technically accomplished or how profound it is, even in its simplicity, let's say. If it does not support the narrative and the vision of the director, it's not going to fly. So finding myself in a position where I'm aware of what my role is in relation to in relation to the person who is making all of the heavy decision making. Now, the director might have written the script as well. He might be the one whose primary vision is the one that everybody is experiencing. Ultimately, depending on what I don't want to say who's pulling the strings, but where the money is coming from, who is going to be producing it, what platform it's going to be promoted through or streamed on. These people ultimately have the end say, and can be a lot of conflicts there. So understanding that you may have one figurehead in the vision that is being projected through this product, there may be 3 or 4 or 5 more silent partners that you have to be aware of and learn how to split the difference. Go to the source of who is going to have the most push and influence, and then learn how to mediate between all of these things. This, to me, being in the mindset to accommodate those visions and those attitudes, that's the second step, is dealing with the people. The music is really a matter of having a functioning artistic mechanism, being able to understand the vocabulary of the style, genre, the medium, the mood, everything that is going to be supporting whatever's happening on the screen. But the biggest thing is, first two the biggest things are understanding the context and then understanding the people. Once I understand those two things, then I want to understand the narrative. Then I want to understand the story. And at that point, when I really get a feel for the story, I will just allow my mind to drift into that space. And whatever appeals to me first, I will usually record into my phone. I'll sing it into my phone. I feel like if an idea first comes into my head and it can be sung or it can be articulated with some kind of human-made sound from my own throat, then it's going to have a quality and a presence that it will not have if I try to noodle and to pull a melody out through and when I say melody, I mean the initial seed idea. If I try to extract it through noodling, I always feel like trying to pull a seed from a piano or from a trumpet, it will always lead me into a box. And I don't want to be in a box. I want to be in a garden, because that's
an interesting metaphor. You don't want to be in a box, you want to be in a garden.
right.
You want to be able to be out where you can blossom and grow and not have be in a box where you can't move and have something fluid happening.
That's right. There needs to be a quantity of organic growth in all of this. And I feel like because so much of the process is originating and then, or let's say, extracting ideas from source material and then being able to conceptualize based on that, and then being able to execute an idea, and then be able to deal with the people in a back and forth process, and then to edit, and also to self-edit, and to revise over and over again. This, if you're working with something that's fixed, I feel like the reductionist method of chopping away at it can leave you with something that's sort of dry and brittle. But if it's something that can be pruned, if it's something that once it bears fruit, then you can take the fruit. If you have a fertile soil, I know I'm really diving into this gardening metaphor, then whatever you have is going to be something that is theoretically viable.
Right.
And I feel like also working with that understanding and approach, there's less of an attachment to ideas, because we all know that growing things and tending to a garden is cyclical. There's certain parts of the cycle where it's not going to yield what you want immediately. Sometimes it will take a very long time. And you can also understand that, to use one of my favorite expressions of yours, not to be afraid to kill our darlings.
Oh, yes.
Sometimes you have to kill the weeds. Sometimes you have to take the whole plant up by the roots and then put it into another place where its ground can be more nutritious and more supporting of the nature of the thing you're trying to grow and develop.
Yeah.
So I try to keep a mind like that, and to really pay attention to the thing as it's developing, both in terms of the back and forth about the literal product with the director, the editor, the producers, but also how the music is supporting and developing along with the film itself. And I feel like, yeah.
I want to stop you and ask you a question. In the past, if there's been a time when you worked on something and then you hated what you did and you wanted to start over, or when you presented something to a director or a supervisor, someone that needed to assess your work, and then they said, that is not the direction I want to go in. I need you to go back to the drawing board. How did you change directions and let go of the idea and go somewhere new?
Well, the first thing is to identify what is the feeling that I get immediately when someone either tells me they don't like my work, or it's shit, or it doesn't fit, or something like that. Because everybody has an experience with this kind of interaction, and it doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel good at all.
Yeah.
And it's a fundamental part of this process. And I don't think having a thick skin is enough, though it is definitely a component, because a lot of the outward stimuli that tries to get in is unnecessary and doesn't have a place in this process. And I think in the emotional structure and mental structure of healthy human beings, for to say the least, I think knowing how to let go, to hear it, to feel the thing, and just process it, and then really think about what the person was saying, because it's not 99% of the time, it's not a personal affront. We're talking about functionality. And if a piece of music or if the sound design is not functional, then it doesn't have a purpose in that production. So what you have to do is go back and make it functional. If somebody asks you to make them a chair and you give them something that's shaped like a chopstick, which is a very sharp point, for the most part, we can probably assume that majority of people will not want to sit on it. I won't mention outliers because people are different. But the point is, you want something that is functional with the mutually agreed on purpose. And in this case, it's something that is going to support a mood. It's going to support a feeling. It is going to change the perception of time in a scene. It is going to change the impact of the scene. It will increase or decrease the viscerality of whatever it is that the audience is interacting with.
There are two questions to answer. What is someone's motivation for telling you something they're telling you? And what are you going to do about it? I'm going to just give an example. And I always love to tell this story because it just makes me giggle. I worked on a film where the director was out of the country reshooting voice for an actor that was in Canada or something like that. And the Academy Award winning picture editor decided he wanted to hear the nurses in this movie in stiletto heels, which was a wrong choice. And we all knew it. And I'd already walked all the nurses in the kinds of shoes nurses. This is Foley for film. When I was doing the Foley on the film, we all knew that that was not correct. Now, politically, I did not have a say in the matter. Neither did the supervising sound editor, neither did anybody else. And the director was out of the country. So the delicate thing to do was to go rewalk everything in stiletto heels because this picture editor, who is no longer with us, had a thing, and who knows why. And we knew that this was going to be nixed by the director when the director came back, because the director knew what he was doing. And it put me in a very strange position of having to redo something and then look like an idiot. So we kept what I did, and then I went back and redid nurses in stiletto heels in a hospital, because that makes sense in a drama. Because no, it wasn't a comedy. And we're all going, I don't know. And then, of course, when it went to the dub stage, the director had got enraged. And I don't remember how it was explained. I don't even remember, because I was younger then. But I do remember thinking, this is a crazy business, and I don't even know why this happened. And I don't know. But I do remember thinking at the time, I cannot believe what goes on in this industry, and I cannot believe I have to do this, and I cannot believe that nobody can say no to this guy, but nobody could say no to him. And this is the sort of thing that goes on. I didn't take it personally. I had a very strong opinion about how crazy it was, as we all did. But it wasn't something where I lost sleep about it. I just went, okay, that's crazy. So please keep my other tracks, because we're going to need them.
Yeah. Wow.
And we all did, because we needed them. And the director went, whose idea was this? And I don't even remember how it was explained. I don't know. I'm pretty certain they didn't hang me out to dry. I'm pretty certain they said, blah, 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 blah. I don't know. I know that they didn't blame me. I know they said, bloody blah, blah, blah. I don't know. But there are things that happen. And then sometimes you do get blamed. And, and then you go, oh, bloody blah, blah, blah. I mean, stuff happens. And that's why I was asking, because sometimes we will get personally blamed for something that we have no control over.
Right.
And I think it becomes a very interesting question about how we personally do not self identify with a criticism that we may get that does not make sense to us, that we have to make a decision about. And we
Mhm.
either change how we do it and then make peace with it, or decide not to. Or we ask ourselves, did I actually do something dumb there? And sometimes I will tell you, I have said to myself, I really did do something dumb there. And what was I thinking? And it might be years later. I have a few instances when I've gone back and listened to Foley I've done in a film, and I went, I, I didn't make a good choice there. And I'm kind of surprised it got by the mixer. And I'm surprised it got by the dub, because that wasn't a good choice. And they actually didn't call me out. Wow, they should have. They should have called me out. They should have said, a moment, Vanessa, you know, we love you, but that was not a good choice. So that's why I was asking, because I have lately seen a few of my old films back in the day when I was young and lovely, where I'm thinking, that wasn't a good choice. What was I thinking? And I'm old enough to live and tell about it now, and I'm laughing at myself thinking, I sure would like to go back and do that one over. So I wonder now what people do when they go, oh, I'd like to erase that. I want to erase that and do that one over. Oh, I can't. I can't now. So I just wonder, because sometimes we get a chance to redo.
Right. It's true. With this is something that is so prevalent in podcasting because, and this is one reason why I am on the fence about if I feel like well, okay, let's just say I have my own qualms about podcasting as a medium because of the impermanence of the medium. I've worked on shows with pretty big audiences, and they would make mistakes in post. They would leave names out of credits. They would bungle dialogue at some point. There would be they would leave a stem in there that was conflicting with something, and I would talk to them about it, and they said, "Oh, no problem." And they would just go back after the thing had already been out for a week or 2 weeks, and they would go back and they would fix it and re-upload it. And this is a process that they can attend to ad nauseum. I know
Yeah.
there's some companies that when they start small, they have podcasting companies, or if it's just a single show, they're recording with subpar equipment. The room is not treated. They don't have actors. They don't have great editing capabilities. They don't have post staff, and they do everything themselves. And what they do is they go and develop and build their audience. Once they reach a point where they either get advertising dollars or they get um, the IP gets bought by a company and they have a budget to produce it, then they produce new shows at the level of the budget, but they'll go back and they'll redress the issues that were issues to begin with in the original shows, and they'll edit all of that stuff out. It's cool that you can do that, but for me, there is something I like the idea about being able to commit to something, a process, a product, to do it, to complete it fully. And that thing is done and it stands as a document for a particular point in time when you worked with other people and you executed based on a very unique kind of creative space that is intrinsic to that thing. And I
Yes.
feel like because you can go back and change all of the stuff, and I'm not talking about doing edits for T or edits for streaming or something like that, because that's the nature of what we're working with, you know? You have to fit it to different mediums. But this thing specifically, being able to go back and redo the entire show change everything after the fact. I feel like it loses some of that initial magic when it might be junk, but it's great junk. It has a vibe, it has a quality.
And I also think because you play jazz, which we haven't mentioned,
Mhm.
jazz opens up a whole world of sound,
Right.
unlike any other musical form. And I trained classically and then musical theater, and then, well, actually, I started in musical theater, then classical, and then jazz. And I can tell you, once I opened my life to jazz, it just opened up the way I heard everything. And you are in jazz. And that has to affect the way you approach everything you do when you do sound, when you create music, when you just, I mean, it just opens up everything because jazz makes everything possible. Wouldn't you agree?
I do. I think jazz is such an enabling art form because it draws from so many disparate influences in terms of rhythm, in terms of structure, in terms of its social history, in terms of its ability to be completely scripted 1 minute and then react spontaneously the next minute. And it's here one moment and it's gone the next. You know, everything is recorded now, everything is filmed, so it's not really, but there is a moment of there's an event when something is happening in a space and the people involved in that space are contributing to that, whether it's the audience or the people that are performing, and it creates a very unique energy, and that creates a moment in time. And I think that's something, this is something intrinsic to this music form, and it's also something that is really enabling for other art forms as well, because you are able to translate that process to more scripted things like playing a piece by Chopin, or maybe I need to compose I need to compose a piece for strings, pizzicato strings, because something plucky and funny is happening. And it needs to be, you know, they don't want me improvising all over the place. It needs to be a specific, simple form. It needs to support what's happening on the screen or what's happening in the dialogue in a very clear and precise way. But the moment of inspiration and then the moment after, being able to respond to that initial moment of inspiration in a way that works with the function of what you're trying to do. This is the power of this music. And this is why it's all such a gift to be able to play it, because it allows people to utilize all of the things they've experienced musically and non-musically, and then respond in a moment to something that's totally new. And that is liberating. And it will charge the human spirit with something that it desperately needs, which is real connection. There is something fundamentally human about being alone in a room. Now, first, I want to say I'm not a Luddite. I don't shun technology. I don't think technology is intrinsically evil, even AI and stuff like that, because if we're going to talk about intrinsic evils of technology, then the wheel is evil, and so is fire. Then so is agriculture. Then so is soap. And I know, as a woman with children, that soap is incredibly important, both from the standpoint of having given birth at the hands of doctors, and then also from having dirty kids that need to get clean. So, you know, we can't say that technology is inherently evil, because I don't believe that. But one thing that I do think is happening is the sensation of a person defining themselves, their integrity, who they are as a person, that what we demonstrate to others by themselves, because you're born into this life alone and you die alone. And there's a connection between these 2 points, that when you're aware of that you came from somewhere unknowable and you're going somewhere unknowable, and you keep this as a perspective, then you experience what happens in the moment in a much more tangible and profound way. And that tangibility is relatable to other people.
Right.
By virtue of experiencing that yourself, you pass it on to another person. There's a sequence in Dante's Inferno, when they're in purgatory, towards the end of purgatory, and they're all climbing up the staircase. It's like one candle lighting the next. You know, that's the gift of the human spirit. And I think that's really a huge function of why we're here, is to is to light other people's spirits and have our own spirits lit up. And to have it lit and to light our own is to experiencing something unknowable, to be open and susceptible to that. You don't have to be religious. You don't have to believe in an energy field. You just experience what you experience, but understand that there is something beyond us. And that is part of our communal reality. And part of the problem with technology now is that we hyper compartmentalize our reality to the point where we're not experiencing that unknowable thing anymore. And that makes everything feel like, well, I can become anything I want to become. You can become anything you're willing to make yourself into, which if you see a lot of plastic surgery and stuff, it makes sense, you know. But the fundamental thing is that we forget that we don't know where we came from and we don't know where we're going, but we know that we're connected on both ends. And when we become so deeply involved in our own image projection, which is the thing that technology is enabling the most, you can present any version of yourself and make people believe it. You can even make yourself believe it. You know, you used to have an attitude and like build this thing. And like when you walk, you have to walk in a certain way and you have to look a certain way and have certain look in your eye, and then people will believe it. But now you can be completely unintimidating and present an image of being totally intimidating, and people will believe it. And then you'll believe that's the person you are. You know, this is part of the thing with technology. So you don't have to experience yourself for who you actually are. The part of yourself that no matter what you do on the outside, you might not be able to change that thing, but you have to learn how to work with it. And I feel like, to me, this is the biggest effect of our reliance on technology to determine who we are, as opposed to being a tool or tools that allow us to expand who we are with each other.
We'll have to do this again.
I would love to.
You have a phenomenal mind, and there's so much to talk about with you, and we could go for hours and people would not do their lives and do their own stories. So let's do this again.
Thank you very much, Vanessa. I
Yeah.
really appreciate you having me on the show.
Well, it's a pleasure, and I'm glad you're here. Thank you.